Evolution is the process by which various types of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms or common ancestors. It is backed up by multiple pieces of evidence consisting of fossils, math models, natural selection, etc. However, homologous structures are clearly the superior piece of evidence. What is a homologous structure? Homologous structures are organs or bones that are seen in many species and occur with a common ancestry. The similarities in the structures of organisms is evidence that life on Earth has a common ancient ancestor that the diverse species have evolved from over time. Even if the function of the structures are different in ways, the common ancestry of the species can be seen in the structure and development of these homologous structures. An example of this is the bone structure in the wing of a bird, the flipper of a seal, the front leg of a sheep, and the arm of a human are all quite similar to each other. Now we have you sitting there amid a surplus of evidence, wondering how is it that they're so similar in structure but have completely different functions. The explanation to this is they have a common ancestor and a long line of descendants. The common ancestor is thought to be where the species originated from and evolved from. Each species in specific levels of evolution branched off clearly over millions of years. Another example of this wonderful piece of evidence is the bone structure in a Homo sapiens arm and a Felis catus leg, a human and a cat's leg. The length of the humerus in each of the two organisms is approximately the same length, making the humerus a homologous structure, as well as the radius and the ulna. Although the carpals, metacarpals, and the phalanges are similar in structure in each of the organisms, they do not have the exact same structure and are not put together the same way. This is why they have different functions, and cats have paws and humans have hands. To encapsulate this piece of information, the leg of a cat and the arm of a human are typical examples of a homologous structure. There are numerous homologous structures in different species, but they do not always have the same function. The humerus in the shrew and the dog are considered a homologous structure. However, the function of the skeletally similar limb is not completely identical. Humans' arms function for gripping objects, while shrews' functions are for running. All of the pieces of evidence involved in evolution are imperative, although, excluding homologous structures, the evidential support separately would have no ground to stand on. Fossils are discovered and observed to see how species have evolved over time. The structure of the fossils help to determine the common ancestor as well. However, the homologous structures truly are being observed. Multiple fossils of different species are found and the structures are examined to find the homologous structures, which then lead to the assistance of determining the common ancient ancestor. Basically, without homologous structures, fossils do not really provide any help into finding the common ancestor. Math models are used to model structures. There would be no models if there were no structures or homologous structures provided. Natural selection is the process in which organisms adapt to their environment and produce offspring that have the characteristics and structures that are in the best interest of them due to their surroundings. This is a huge piece of evidence that backs up evolution, but it would not be backed up by itself without homologous structures. How can you have evolution without proof of a common ancestor? Adaptation occurs and species evolve, but how would we know that species evolved without looking at their structures? Natural selection is all about adaptation, which is referring to similar structures and the comparison of a species' structure over time. Overall, the aforementioned pieces of evidence stated and provided backup information to would not compile a stable argument in supporting the theory of evolution without homologous structures. The best piece of evidence that supports the theory of evolution is homologous structures.
So, for homologous structures, you have to see it. And visually, we know that, like Ashley was saying before, the evolution occurred through what was interestingly like the root of a tree. And so there's this common ancestor up here, and it's slowly evolving into different branches. So here you're going to have, let's say, a fish, okay? And then from the fish, other different species of fish came about. Like, somebody give me a name of
Trout.
fish. Trout, thank you. Trout. Okay.
Goldfish.
And then maybe you have like a capelin. I don't know if I spelled that right. It's not really that important. And then, let's say from this common ancestor, then you have mammals. So from mammals, you have things like a whale, which is a mammal. And then you have things like a human. Okay? Now you're thinking, well, okay, a fish and a mammal are supposed to come from the same place. How does that happen? Well, how do you have evidence that these came from the same place if they're so different? You get this you have to support this evidence with homologous structures by saying that, let's say the whale has this bone here. Okay, now I'm not an artist, but this whale has, I think this is the humerus, and then from there you have, okay, an ulna right here, okay, and then from the ulna you also have a radius, okay. Now this is very small in comparison to, for example, a human, which would have, just bear with me here. This is the humerus, okay? And then you would have the ulna, again, and then you would have radius. In each of the bone structures, if you look at the bone structure specifically, and I have a diagram here that displays it much better than my beautiful drawing over there, but if you look and compare each of the structures, what you can undeniably see is that the bone structures are all very, very similar, which proves that evolution has occurred over time. And if you see, like for example, let's say a bat and a pterodactyl. So a pterodactyl had an arm, had limbs like that, okay? I'm not an artist, I'm sorry, this is awful drawings, but what you can see is that they have these hands here, and then they have the bone structures here, okay? And then this is a pterodactyl. And then then you see a bat, for example. And this is a bat's arm. So this is a pterodactyl, and then this would be the bat's arm. So if the arms have similar bone structures, which is not a coincidence, this is homologous structures that have occurred through evolution and have progressively turned into different things, just like the root of a tree. And then from each different thing, there comes even more variations of species. Not here, but like you would have variations of each generic species. So, homologous structures.